Well, this morning I'm chatting with Martin Tatham, who is EMF's new Church Partnership Coordinator. We have avoided the old style title of representative, although there's nothing wrong with that, but this illustrates a little bit more what we have in mind. It's not just about someone going and representing the mission, but seeking to engage with a view to partnership in the work of the gospel in Europe. So I think the simplest way to begin, Martin, is to ask you to just tell us a little bit about your background.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, the first thing to say is I'm a Christian. I became a Christian about 37 years ago, so I walked with the Lord for that time, and He's been faithful. I became a Christian when I was at university through a Christian mission at the university. Before then I had a sort of a quasi-religious background, but then I was convinced by the truth of the gospel and what was said in Scripture, and then I've never looked back since then. I'm married. My wife Pat and I have been married for just coming up to 30 years, just under 30 years, and we have two boys. Well, young men, I suppose you'd say, Jonathan and Ben. They're both moved away from home. Ben's at university, but Jonathan works for Deloitte. And I'm based in Suffolk. We go to one of the Grace Baptist churches in Suffolk, Kesgrave Baptist Church, where Andrew Thompson's the minister. So one of the many Grace Baptist churches in Suffolk. And I have maybe a slightly unusual background. I'm not from a ministerial background. So I actually come originally from quite an academic background. So I studied physics at Oxford University, and then went on to do a PhD in quantum physics, quantum semiconductor physics, and that's probably about as much as you want to know about that topic. But
I would love to know a little bit more, but I'm not sure I'm capable.
So then we moved on from that and into more of a business background. When I joined BT, and I then worked for BT for about just under 30 years.
So and did you have a number of different roles within BT then?
Quite a number, yes. That was one of the advantages of working for BT. You could move from different roles, starting with research, and almost as soon as I joined the research department at BT, they decided to stop doing research. So then we moved into more software engineering and some of the embryonic internet standards, and then eventually moved into a role which was leading the design work for the BT Global Services area.
Now, of course, you made a quantum leap in coming from BT to EMF. Perhaps it's a reverse quantum leap, I don't know. And initially you were our transition manager to help us through that process of selling Gessens, planning a new office, and you were involved in a lot of that, and your skills were very helpful in that respect. And that you did that for about 6 months, but then of course now you've been in this new role for a month, and during that time altogether you've got to know EMF quite well. And can you just tell me a little bit about how you see EMF, what you've learned about EMF, what you feel about EMF, your view of EMF, that sort of thing?
Yes, yeah, and it was a great privilege, and I think we've seen the Lord's hand in the way that all that transition has worked. And Stephen, the thing that really stands out from EMF, I think, is the missionaries and the work the missionaries do. So as you know, we have about 90 missionaries in 15 countries around Europe, and each one of them comes with an inspiring story. Each one is a lesson in devotion and dedication to the work of the gospel. Some in very hard countries where you're not seeing much tangible fruit, others in countries where you're seeing tremendous response to the gospel. But I suppose it's those missionaries who really make EMF stand out, and I think the fact that almost all of those are indigenous missionaries, and so fully immersed in the culture, obviously speak the language, often in many cases stay on even after they're retired, and provide wisdom and their experience to younger people in the church, and that's tremendous. And I think that combined with the model for supporting churches, with a very strong support from UK churches partnering with those missionaries, and a clear sort of doctrinal stance about a reformed doctrinal stance, I think makes EMF in a very strong position.
And you're probably like me as well, in the sense that one of the things I value about EMF is its history and its kind of stance over the long haul. But I think what you've highlighted is really, shall we say, among its best features. What about your new role then, Church Partnership Coordinator? Just tell us what it is and maybe a little bit about how you're going to go about it.
So it's a bit of a grand title, Church Partnership Coordinator, but I think it's quite a simple role, which is the link between the missionaries in Europe and the supporting churches and supporting individuals who are mainly in the UK. So almost all the missionaries, as you know, are indigenous, and almost all the support, financial support, the prayer support, the fellowship, is from UK churches and individuals. And so at its simplest, I think my role is being the link between the two and making sure that all of the work done in Europe by the missionaries and their churches is communicated back to the supporters as effectively as we can, so that the supporting churches and individuals know how their support is being used, and they get to know about some of the work that the churches that God is doing through those churches in Europe.
So how would you say that this is going to actually develop and sort of work itself out over the coming months and hopefully years?
So I think, Stephen, there's a couple of areas I'd like to mention. I think it's the moving target, so we'll find out more as we go on. The first area, I think, is just how we make better and more effective use of different communication media. Essentially, how we make it as simple as possible and effective for the supporters in the UK to find out what's going on in Europe and keep abreast of that. There's lots going on, and lots of news, lots of things which it's worth people knowing about. So how do we make that as effective as possible to communicate back from Europe how God is using the missionaries and the churches for His kingdom? I think the second thing is we'd love to see stronger partnerships between the supporters in the UK and individual missionaries in Europe. And I think this is a testimony we see of so many missionaries and so many supporting churches, that where there's a strong bond between a supporting church and a particular missionary, then that's a source of mutual thanksgiving and encouragement, a greater partnership in the gospel. And it's a bit of an echo of what you see Paul talking about in 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, that mutual thanksgiving and the partnership in the gospel. And we'd love to see more of that. So a closer link between individual churches and individual missionaries. So there's and a two-way a relationship there. And in some ways, the idea would be for EMF to almost fade in the background as an organisation. So we would just be the conduit of information. The focus would be on the partnership between the missionaries and the supporting churches. And that's a model I think we'd love to see more and more of.
One of the things that, and it's been mentioned in different contexts, is that sometimes you can have, say, 3 or 5 churches supporting one missionary, but they don't actually know each other, and they don't know that they're supporting the same ministry. So a missionary. So is there a way maybe where that could be brought together?
Yeah, I think that's an area we'd like to explore, and certainly for things like as the missionaries come over for deputation, it would help them a lot to be able to go and visit a group of churches in an area, all of whom are supporting them. That would make their life better. But also for the supporting churches to really appreciate the full extent of the needs of the missionaries, so they can be involved in supporting them and making sure they have everything they need.
One of the things that I find, particularly travelling around in the last year, is just how much the missionaries value the links with the churches. Mainly in the UK, as you say, but obviously we've got Australia, we've got other places that express a real interest, but the UK is very much in focus. Obviously, we wish you well. If you're watching this video and you know about EMF, well, at least now you know a little bit more about Martin. Pray for him and his work. And also, as we try and just continue to consolidate the work of the mission, but also expand it. So remember that. And if you want to contact Martin, you can contact him through the office, or if you look on the website, all the details there. You can contact him if you want to invite him. Feel free to do that. He'd be very, very happy to do it. Thanks, Martin. Appreciate talking to you.
Thank you, Stephen.